Hello, welcome to the Self Learning Platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 2, Plato, and our topic is Political Philosophy of Plato. The first one is Theory of Justice. For Plato, justice does not consist in mere adherence to the law, for it is based on the inner nature of the human spirit. It is also not triumph of the stronger over the weaker, for it protects the weaker against the stronger. A just state, Plato argues, is achieved with an eye to the good of the whole. In a just society, the rulers, the military, the artisan all do what they ought to do. In such a society, the rulers are wise, soldiers are brave, and producers are exercise self-control or temperance. Justice is the central theme of the Plato's Republic. Its subtitle entitled Concerning Justice. For Plato, justice is a moral concept. Barker says justice is for Plato at once a part of human virtue and the bond which joins men together in the states. It makes man good and makes him social. Almost a similar view has been expressed by Sabine. He says justice for Plato is a bond which holds a society together. Justice gives the resemblance of what is used in the Greek language dikaioson, a word which has a more comprehensive meaning than the word justice. Dikaioson means just righteousness. That is why Plato's notion of justice is not regarded legal or judicial, nor is it related to the realms of rights and duties. It does not come within the limits of law. It is, as such, related to social ethics. The essential characteristics of Plato's notion can be stated as these. Justice is another name of righteousness. It is more the performance of duties than the enjoyment of rights. It is individuals' contribution to the society in accordance with the abilities, capacities, and capabilities of individual. It is a social morality, man's obligation. It is the strength of the social fabric as it involves a web of social system. Before stating these views through Socrates, Plato refuted the then prevailing theories of justice. He denounced the father son's theory of justice of traditional morality, justice giving every man his duty, in other words, doing to others what is proper, or doing good to friends and harming enemies. Plato recognized the worth of the traditional theory of justice, which compels men to do what they are supposed to do, or justice as phenomena creating unity. But he did not approve the justice being good for some and evil for others. Justice is, Plato held, good for all, the giver as well as the receiver, for friends as well as foes. Plato also rejected Thrasymachus' radical notion of justice, according to which justice is always in the interest of the stronger. He did not agree with Thrasymachus that the ruler, because he knows the art of ruling, has all the power, but did not agree that the ruler rules in his own interest. Plato argued through Socrates that the shoemaker does not wear all shoes he makes. The farmer does not eat all the crops he prepares. Accordingly, the ruler does not make all the laws which benefit him. Plato agreed that Thrasymachus that justice is an art, and that one who knows the art is the artist and none else. And yet, there is another theory of justice advocated by two brothers, Glaucon and Admetus, Plato's own brothers. The theory is a conventional theory of justice and one which was favorably agreed to by Plato's hero Socrates. Glaucon held the view that the justice is in the interest of the weaker, as opposed to Thymus' view that it is in the interest of the stronger, and that it is artificial in so far as it product of customs and conventions. Glaucon says men do not suffer injustice freely and without restraint, but the weaker, finding that they suffer more injustice than they can inflict, make a contract one with another, neither to do injustice nor to suffer it to be done. And in pursuance of the contract, they lay down a law, the provisions of which are henceforth the standard of action and the code of justice. Plato did see limitations in Glaucon's theory by describing justice as natural and universal, as against Glaucon's notion of it as artificial and product of conventions and customs. Plato's own theory adds strengths from the discussion which went on among characters such as Saplus, Polymerchus, Thymus, and Glaucon, Adlertmus, and Socrates appears to be as under. Justice is nothing but principle, that each one should pursue a function for which one is fitted by nature, each one to do one's own for one's own and for common good. Justice means specialization and excellence. Justice helps people to be in a society, a bond that holds society, a harmonious union of individuals of classes with the state. It is a bond that brings together individuals, classes, and state into one frame. Justice is both a public and private virtue. It aims at the highest good of the individual and of the whole society. Plato's theory of justice leads to division of labor, specialization, and efficiency. It is therefore a principle of specialization, unity, non interference, and harmony. His notion of justice implies a social virtue, a private and public ethics, and a moral dictate. And yet, Plato's theory of justice is totalitarian in the sense that it subordinates individual to the state. The next point is scheme of education. Plato's Republic is not merely an essay on government. It is, as Rousseau's Informers, a treatise on education. The essence of his whole philosophy, as stated in the Republic, was to bring about reforms, political, economic, social, as well as moral, intellectual, cultural, in the ancient Greek society. The object of the Republic was to locate and thereafter establish justice in the ideal state, and his scheme of education aimed precisely at that. For Plato, social education is a means to social justice. It is therefore not incorrect to say that education for Plato had been a solution to all the vexed questions. Education at closer tells us has been an instrument for moral reforms. Plato's theory of education is an attempt to touch the evil at its very source. It is an attempt to cure a mental malady by a mental medicine. Barker rightly says that Plato's scheme of education brings the soul into that environment which in each stage of its growth is best suited for its development. Plato's theory of education is important in his political theory. It is important in so far as it provides a basis for the ideal state designed to achieve justice. Following his teacher Socrates, Plato had a belief in the dictum that virtue is knowledge, and for making people virtuous, he made education a powerful instrument. Plato also believed that education builds man's character and it is therefore a necessary condition for extracting man's natural faculties in order to develop his personalities. Education is not a private enterprise for Plato. It is public insofar it provides a moral diagnosis to the social ailments. Barker, speaking for Plato, says this education is a path of social righteousness and not of social success. It is a way to reach the truth. Education, Plato emphasized, was necessary for all the classes in society, especially for those who govern the people. The rulers for Plato are supreme because they are educated by philosophers. For the rule of the philosophers, as Barker explains, is the result of the education they receive. Plato, in his proposed scheme of education, accepts certain assumptions. Soul, being initiative and active, throws up through education the best things that are latent in it. Education molds the character of the growing young. It does not provide eyes to the blind, but it does not give vision. It does give vision to men with eye. It brings soul to the realms of light. It activates and reactivates the individual. Each level of education has a pre-assigned function. The elementary education helps individuals give direction to their powers. Middle level education helps individuals understand their surrounding, and higher education helps individuals prepare, determine, and decide their course of education. Education helps people earn a living and also helps them to become better human beings. Plato does not want to make education a commercial enterprise. He wants, as Sabine tells us, that education must itself provide the needed means, must see that citizens actually get the training they require, and must be sure that the education supplies is constant with the harmony and well-being of the state. Plato's plan, Sabine states, is therefore for a state-controlled system of compulsory education. His educational scheme falls naturally into parts: the elementary education, which includes the training of the young persons up to about the age of 20 and culminating in the beginning of the military service, and the higher education intended for those selected persons of both sexes who are to be members of two ruling classes and extending from the age of 20 to 35. Plato's scheme of education had both the Athenian and the Spartan influence. Sabine writes, it must generally Spartan feature was the dedication of education exclusively to civic training. Its content was typically Athenian, and its purpose was dominated by the end of moral and intellectual cultivation. The curriculum of the elementary education was divided into two parts: gymnastic for training the body and music for training the mind. The elementary education was to be imparted to all three classes, but after the age of 20, those selected for higher education were those who were to hold the highest positions in the guardian class between 20 and 35. The guardians were to be constituted of the auxiliary class and the ruling class. These two classes were to have a higher dose of gymnasium and music, greater dose of gymnastic for the auxiliaries, and greater dose of music for the rulers. The higher education of the two classes was in purpose professional, and for his curriculum Plato chose the only scientific studies: mathematics, astronomy, and logic. Before the two classes could get on to their jobs, Plato suggested a further education till the age of about 50, mostly practical in nature. In conclusion, we may identify the characteristic features of Plato's scheme of education as teach. His scheme of education was for the guardian class, that is, the luxury class and the ruling class. He had ignored the producing class completely. His whole education plan was state controlled. It aimed at attaining the physical, mental, intellectual, moral development of human personality. It consisted of three stages: elementary between 6 to 20, higher between 20 to 35, practical between 35 to 50. It aimed at preparing the rulers for administrative statesmanship, soldiers for military skill, and producers for material productivity. It sought to bring a balance between the individual needs and social requirements. Plato's plan of education was undemocratically devised insofar as it ignored the producing class. It was limited in nature and was restrictive in extent by laying more emphasis on mathematics than on literature. The whole plan was unexpectedly and unduly expensive. It was unindividual in the sense that it restricted man's thinking process and his autonomy. It was too abstract and too theoretical, so much so it lost sight of administrative intricacies. Here we want to wind up this lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.